You are in a conversation you did not choose to be in. Someone is talking at you, not to you, and somewhere in the middle of their third sentence you feel it. That specific, quiet contraction in the chest. The one that says, I need to leave. But your face doesn't move. Your body doesn't shift. You nod. You laugh at exactly the right moment. You ask a follow-up question that you do not care about the answer to. And here is what is actually happening in that moment. Every sensor you have is pointed outward. You already know what this person wants to hear. You already know the exact tone that will keep them comfortable, the precise sentence that will end this interaction cleanly, on good terms, with no emotional debris left in the air. And you deliver it, flawlessly, without effort. The way a concert pianist doesn't think about their fingers. What you don't notice, because you never do, is that somewhere in the process of running that performance, you disappeared. Not dramatically, not all at once, just the particular, quiet way a light dims when the power drops slightly. Still looks on from a distance, but the room is darker. That is the trap at the center of all of this. Not that people pleasers are too kind or too accommodating or too sensitive. The trap is that they are incredibly skilled at something that carries a very specific and almost invisible cost. And the cost is not their time. It is not their energy. The cost is the self. Now here is the paradox, and it is worth sitting with. The person who is universally liked is often the least known. The most socially fluent human in any room is, quietly, one of the most isolated. They have mastered the mechanics of connection. They have spent years developing an extraordinary sensitivity to other people's emotional states, preferences, needs. And in doing so, without ever planning to, without ever choosing it, they have slowly, systematically made themselves invisible. The approval is real. What is being approved of is not. That is not a character flaw. That is a survival system. And understanding exactly how it became one changes everything. The behavior has a clinical name, several, depending on which framework you prefer, but the clinical names all describe the output. None of them describe the mechanism. What people pleasers are actually doing, at the level of moment-to-moment neurological processing, is running a very specific, very old, very efficient algorithm. Call it relational camouflage. Relational camouflage is the automatic, ongoing process of reading another person's emotional state and then adjusting your own visible self to match what that state requires. Not what you feel, not what you think, not what you actually want from the interaction, what they need to see. It is not kindness. Kindness has a self in it. Kindness says, I see that you need something and I want to give it to you. Relational camouflage is different. Relational camouflage says, I see that you need something, and I am going to become it, because the alternative feels dangerous. That distinction is everything. You see it in specific, repeatable, observable patterns. The person who never orders first at a restaurant, who waits, listens carefully to everyone else, and then orders something adjacent to what the group chose. The person who apologizes for having an opinion before stating it. The person who describes their own preferences only in the negative. I don't mind, I'm easy, whatever you want. The person who laughs when they are hurt, because hurt might make someone uncomfortable. These are not habits born of politeness. They are calibrated outputs of a system trained, over many years, to prioritize relational smoothness over personal truth. And the surface logic is completely coherent. If you erase your own friction, relationships go smoothly. If you absorb conflict, the room stays calm. If you never have visible preferences, you can never disappoint anyone, never cause tension, never be the reason the environment turns difficult. The tragedy is not that the logic is wrong. The tragedy is that it works. In the short term, relational camouflage is extraordinarily effective. People like you. Conversations go well. Relationships feel stable. The system gets constant, reliable reinforcement. But the surface explanation is not the real explanation. The smoothness is not the goal. The smoothness is just the evidence of something operating far deeper, something that does not actually live in social situations at all, something much older than any of the rooms you are currently navigating. Most people, at this point, reach for the obvious explanation: low self-esteem, a chronic need for validation, an inability to tolerate disapproval. And that framing is not entirely wrong. But it is like describing a burn wound as the skin being red. Technically accurate, completely missing the point. The actual mechanism is a nervous system problem masquerading as a personality trait. Here is what actually happened. At some point, usually early, usually before language fully developed, a child learnt that the emotional state of the adults around them was directly linked to their own experience of safety. Not in a metaphorical sense, literally, physically. When the parent was regulated and calm, the environment was predictable. When the parent was distressed, something difficult followed. The quality of the voice, the predictability of the space, the temperature of the whole atmosphere. All of it shifted with the emotional weather of the adults in charge. So the child did what any intelligent organism does when its environment is unpredictable. It became a sensor. It learnt to read subtle shifts in facial expression. It learnt to detect changes in tone before the words carried meaning. It learnt to monitor body posture, the speed of movements, the quality of silence. And once it learnt to read the emotional weather, it learnt to do something even more sophisticated. It learnt to intervene, to smooth, to adjust its own visible presentation to prevent the storm from arriving in the first place. This child did not learn that other people's feelings were interesting. The child learnt that other people's feelings were survival-critical data. That is not a pathology. That is an adaptation, a genuinely brilliant one. In the environment it was developed for, this system was exactly right. Turns out what looks, from the outside, like compulsive niceness in an adult is actually the residue of a child who became an expert in threat detection. The people-pleasing is not the disorder. It is the old solution to an old problem, still running in a world where the original problem no longer exists in the same form. The reason why this matters, the reason why this is more than a comforting reframe, is because of what that wiring does to the nervous system in adulthood when the original threat is gone. When you have spent formative years treating the emotional states of others as survival-relevant information, the system does not simply switch off when the environment changes. It generalizes. It runs in every social context, in every professional interaction, in every new relationship, in every room you walk into for the first time. You are not choosing to read people. You are compelled to. The scanning begins before conscious thought. The adjustment happens immediately after. And the entire process is so automatic, so deeply embedded in how you process social reality, that most people who do it have no idea it is happening at all. They simply experience it as, I just like making people feel comfortable. I just don't like conflict. I'm just easygoing. None of those are lies. They are just descriptions of the output, not the origin. Right now, you are probably thinking, yes, this is me. But also, this is just who I am. And that thought, right there, is the exact point where this pattern either continues for another decade or begins to shift. Because there is a specific fork in the path here, and which direction someone takes is determined by one variable. Not willpower, not therapy, not insight even. The variable is this: whether or not they are willing to run the experiment. Here is what that means. The person running relational camouflage has a core, largely untested belief at the center of the system. The belief is, if I say the true thing, if I hold my actual position, express my real preferences, allow someone to feel disappointed without immediately rushing to resolve it, the relationship will break. They will reject me. The room will turn hostile. Something bad will happen that I will not be able to manage. That belief feels like certainty. It does not feel like a hypothesis. It feels like knowledge. But it is not knowledge. It is an old prediction, extrapolated from a childhood environment that no longer exists, applied wholesale to every adult relationship, regardless of the actual evidence. And the cruel structural irony of relational camouflage is that it prevents the experiment from ever being conducted. Every time the instinct is to smooth, to accommodate, to suppress, and the person follows that instinct, the belief is never tested. The system never receives the corrective data. The prediction stays intact because no one ever checks whether it is accurate. Most of the time, it is not. The two paths here are genuinely different in outcome. The first type of person with this wiring recognizes the pattern, understands the origin, and, slowly, practically, begins to distinguish between situations where the old system is firing and situations that actually warrant it. They do not stop being perceptive, they stop being compulsive about it. They develop a capacity to pause between the social scan and the behavioral response. And in that pause, a question becomes possible. Does this situation actually require me to disappear? The second type uses the insight differently. They understand the pattern, they feel the recognition, and they quietly use it to justify the pattern. The internal story becomes, this is my nervous system. This is how I was wired. And whilst that framing feels like self-compassion, and in a limited sense it is also the most sophisticated defense the system has ever produced. Because it sounds like healing. It functions as avoidance. Actually, the second path is the more common one. Not because those people lack courage, but because real change in this pattern requires something the nervous system has been trained to treat as existential threat. Sitting in the discomfort of someone else's disappointment without immediately moving to resolve it. Not for hours, not dramatically, just long enough for the system to register. The disappointment arrived. I survived. The relationship did not collapse. That is the feedback loop the system has never had. And without it, the cost continues to accumulate. It is worth naming the cost precisely, because the obvious framing, that people pleasers are exhausted, that they give too much, misses the real damage. The real cost is that the people pleaser never finds out what happens when they are real. They never run the experiment. They assume the worst, and they never discover whether the assumption is accurate. The approval they receive is constant, and it means almost nothing to them. Because they know, at some level, that the version of them being approved of was constructed for the occasion. You are probably also realizing something else right now. The loneliness in this pattern is not the loneliness of being alone. It is a very specific, very quiet grief. The grief of being in a room full of people who know you, who genuinely like you, and feeling utterly unseen. Not because they are not paying attention, but because the thing they are paying attention to is a performance you ran for them, and the real signal, the actual you, was suppressed before anyone had the chance to respond to it. That grief is the cost, not the tiredness, not the resentment, the grief. So here is the precise observation that resolves what was introduced at the very beginning. The person in that opening conversation, the one nodding, asking follow-up questions they do not care about, running a flawless performance of engagement, is not a weak person. They are not people-pleasing because they lack courage or self-respect. They are doing it because they are, genuinely, one of the most socially and emotionally intelligent people in any environment they occupy. Relational camouflage is not the symptom of a deficient person. It is the adaptive output of someone who became extraordinarily attuned to the emotional reality of other people, and then never learned to apply that same precision and care to themselves. They can read every person in the room, the micro-expressions, the tonal shifts, the body language, the subtext beneath what is being said. They are exceptionally good at it. What they cannot do, what they have never really practiced, is turn that same quality of attention inward. The scanning, the calibration, the reading, all of it has always pointed outward. The one signal that was consistently suppressed, consistently treated as secondary, consistently deprioritized in service of managing the environment, was their own. And that is the exact inversion that resolves the paradox. The person who is universally liked but profoundly alone is not a contradiction. It is a logical consequence of a system that perfected external reading at the direct expense of internal contact. The more precisely and consistently you read and accommodate others, the more you practice ignoring your own signal. Every interaction reinforces the skill in one direction. Every interaction leaves the other direction slightly more unfamiliar. The problem was never the sensitivity. The sensitivity is the gift, genuinely the most useful and sophisticated social capacity a person can develop. The problem was the direction it was trained to point. The people pleaser does not need to become less attuned to other people. They need to apply the same precise, almost clinical attention they have been giving to everyone around them to the one subject they have been systematically avoiding. Because the version of them that the whole room has approved of is extraordinarily competent. It is well-liked, low friction, socially valuable. It is also not them. And the real experiment, the one where they say the true thing, hold the actual position, allow someone to sit with disappointment without rushing to resolve it, has never been run. Not because it is too risky, because it has never been tried. When it finally is, one of two things happens. Either the relationship survives the honesty, or it becomes clear, quite efficiently, that the relationship was never with them to begin with. Both outcomes are a form of information. Neither is as catastrophic as the system predicted. The people pleaser is not afraid of other people. They are afraid of what other people will do the moment they finally meet someone real. Thanks for watching. If you enjoy this video, please like and subscribe for more Uncanny Psychology. What part of this video resonated most with you? What video would you like for us to make next? Let us know in the comments.